My name is Rick Firestone.
My name is Benjamin Bugale.
And you're listening to pixelprojectradio, a video game and video game club style podcast where we do deep dive reviews on the games that we love and the games that you love too. What are we talking about today, Ben?
Richard, today we are talking about Spyro, the Reignited Trilogy.
Ha ha ha. We're going to reignite this review and send it into the ether. Not really sure where I was going with that one.
No, I liked it a lot, actually. And whenever you said a deep dive, all I could think was as deep as you can go into certain games. But
really? Because what I thought of when I think deep dive is the amazing underwater controls of the Spyro games.
Touche. Remarkable, outstanding, breathtaking. Except, is there any breath to take? I think it's great anyway.
So we just wanted to say at the top of the show, if you're a new listener, welcome. We're happy to have you. If you're a returning listener, welcome to you as well. We're happy to have you. If you're not a listener, I don't know how you're hearing this right now. The last episode that we did was on Disco Elysium, and that was a really, really big game. Definitely a large episode, and we even didn't get to a lot of it. This episode is not going to be quite like that. Spyro is a good game. They are good games, but there is not as much depth to them as something like Disco or Witcher or even Zelda. So we're going to be spending a little more time in the generalities for this episode, talking about opinions and things like that, as the story is pleasant but simple.
It is remarkably simple and pleasant, I think. I think you're hitting the nail on the head there, but it was a fun little trip down memory lane to play through these games, though I admit, as a young person, I had only ever played the first Spyro. I only played Spyro the Dragon, so to play the other two was a new experience for me.
Oh, that's interesting, because I only ever played the second and third ones.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm not just making this into a bit. That's real life. I had Ripto's Rage. That was my first one, and I liked it so much that I got Year of the Dragon. That's the one as a kid that I spent the most time on. I had only ever watched my cousins play the first one.
My friend Dalton, who lived up the hill from me.
Shout out to Dalton.
Shout out to Dalton Banzuch, Sonic Blade 5 forever. Yeah, he totally always owned Spyro the Dragon and didn't make the game using his computer and downloaded it to a blank CD. He definitely didn't do that. He's always owned it. And so I went up one summer and would in fact play the first Spyro game at his house, and goodness gracious, I loved it. I thought it was wild fun in its own right when I was a younger person, and I never knew about Ripto's Rage. I knew about Year of the Dragon. I remember the ads for Year of the Dragon, and it looked like a fun game, and I see why you played so much of it.
And speaking of Year of the Dragon and Dalton totally obtaining the game in a legal way, that's a nice bit of foreshadowing into something that made Year of the Dragon not infamous, but definitely noteworthy. It had some anti-piracy measures that were more unique than the other two games. But before we get into all of that, do you want to give our one-sentence reviews? One-sentence review to... we keep it casual here. Do you want to go first?
I would like you to go first this time, Richard, as I'm still processing little bits of it, as I literally finished Year of the Dragon earlier today, but I would love to hear your review first.
Sure, no problem. So, Spyro the Reignited Trilogy is as faithful a recreation as I've ever seen. Almost every aspect is updated and given a fresh 21st century perspective, and while that also means it maintains the original trilogy's issues, it delivers as authentic a 90s experience to newer generations as is possible on newer hardware. I would personally give the overall trilogy a 6 out of 10.
Eloquent, fair, beautiful, not unlike you yourself as a person. I would say, okay, so the Reignited Trilogy. Give me a second because I'm wanting to backspace things I'm currently looking at. But I will just... This might sound a little bit piecemeal. An honest recreation of a favorite of any 90s kid. A triumph through the Unreal Engine that could be enjoyed by most any gamer of any age. I give the Reignited Trilogy a 7.5 out of 10.
Awesome. Yeah, that tracks. And, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot, Ben. So I just wanted to say a little something up front. I was thinking about, you know, how I'm rating the Spyro games and how I'm rating some upcoming games like It Takes Two and how I rated Zelda. And, you know, I was talking with some friends and they were like, man, how could you give them like a 6 out of 10? Or, you know, how could you be thinking about this as a 5.5 out of 10? And while I will honestly say, I think I maybe should have given Zelda Majora's Mask a 6.5 or maybe a 7 out of 10, I stand by these ratings because here's the thing. You know, the problem with reviewers that I've seen, Ben, and I don't know if you agree with me here, is that the reviews are almost always relegated from 7 out of 10 to 10 out of 10. Almost without question, generally 7 or 8. When a game is like, when you hear a reviewer saying like a game is like truly bad, they might give it like a 5 or a 6. But like, if we have the whole 10 number spectrum to play with, why would we not use it? Like a 6 out of 10 is still a darn good game. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think back to like getting grades in school. And, you know, I know we could talk about the wonderful institution that is higher education and education in general in the United States. But when somebody gets like, let's say a C, like let's say a 70, 75%, that's often seen as like not a great grade, right? Even though they got 75% of everything correct. You know what I mean? And like, I'm not trying to turn this into a diatribe or oversimplify the grading system in the United States. By the way, I did not get C's. Thank you very much. I got straight A's. But all this to say is like, I think it's okay to be critical of things and still enjoy them. So when I say something like Spyro is a 6 out of 10 for me, or Majora's Mask, my updated, is like a 6.5 or 7 out of 10, that means that game resonated with me way more than it didn't. You know what I mean?
That's when you say it resonated more than it didn't. I think that's fair, and I think that makes sense. For me, I do go by the grading system as if it's school. So for me, 75, as I've basically rated the entire trilogy, I'm gonna say that that's not great just by my measure. It's good. It's a game. It's a platformer that I enjoyed. Left a lot to be desired. It's certainly not, dare I say, Super Mario Sunshine or anything like that. But it's for me, I will say there are games that track well below 5 for me. So I agree with you also on saying that the whole scale should be moved. Just for me, if it functions as a game and it is at least functioning, I'm going to probably give it close to a 6, 7 or onward. But there are some games like, and I know we're not talking about this game necessarily, Hello Neighbor. I don't know if you've ever tried to play Hello Neighbor.
I've heard that it's an arduous experience to physically play that game.
Have you ever broken a piece of glass, put duct tape over it, and said, "Why can't I see through this?"
Why, yes, I have now that you mention it.
Yeah, so that's what playing Hello Neighbor is like. So that game was just pretty broken, and as much potential and as fun as a game as it is, that's easily a 3 for me. Just so what I'm saying is, I smell what you're stepping in entirely. As
I love that turn of phrase.
Oh, I love it too. So,
but I think you touched on something good here too that I think about whenever I'm personally reviewing art or games or whatever, and that is that, like, you know, it comes down to personality, right? I think a lot of the reason that we don't see that, we certainly do see a lot of personality in reviewers professionally. And certainly the YouTube reviewers that we look up to, like Video Game Donkey and Pro Jared, and folks like that. But, you know, whenever corporations and money gets involved, that's when things get sticky, and corporations don't like it whenever you don't give them favorable reviews, it turns out. because
What?
capitalism. Exactly. But I think, you said for you, Hello Neighbor would be a true 3. When I'm thinking about true 2s or 3s, I'm thinking like Getting Over It with Bennett Foley. And like, I think it comes down to our personal voices, and I think that's one of the cool things about reviewing stuff is like your personal voice. Like, yes, we have to say subjectively, the remaster is a great remaster, but we have personalities. So we can let that seep through whenever we're talking about our review. Because, if reviewers didn't have a personality, we would only need a handful of reviewers, right? A lot of people would be out of jobs. And that's why whenever, like, for example, when Pro Jared says that he likes an RPG, that probably means that I will like it. And if Video Game Donkey says that he likes an RPG, and this is what do you call it? This is an example that Donkey gave. If Donkey likes an RPG, then that's a good RPG because he doesn't like RPGs very much, And that's where the voice comes in. And that's like super important. So like, yeah, I can see people having a knee-jerk reaction like, how could you give Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask a 6? And it's like, well, because that's what it was for me, It's a great game, so much about it that I like, but for me it was a 6. And that's better than a 5 and a 4 and a 3 and a 2 and a 1 and a 0. Although I would never give anything a 0,
I would, but that's a whole nother story. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. For me, whenever I'm personally reviewing things through my voice, I try to look at it as, does it complete the function? So let me talk about a game called The Dear God for a moment, which happens to be the greatest sin ever created in video games. And I just want to say, for me, like to give an example of how I view the game, I look at a game and I'll say, does this game live up to what it's trying to be? So that's like my first thing I'm rating it on. Like, I actually, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, are the graphics great or is the music perfect? That's not it for me. Is the game doing what it's trying to do?
Right. I mean, you can't judge a game like Spyro from '99 against games from 2021. Like, it wasn't trying to be that.
Nor was it trying to be a game from 1995. It's they're all
Precisely.
being there. So, I start with that. From there, I go to functionality. I go to, how captivating is it? Now, I mean, if it's a game like Getting Over It or, what's another one? Super Crate Box. Like, it's like, okay, I get what you're going for and I see the category it exists in, but it's not necessarily my cup of tea either. So I smell what you're stepping in. But The Dear God let me down. And sometime I'll go on a 90-minute rant about it. But
I rarely, podcasts are an auditory medium, but I rarely see conviction matching that of your eyes right now when you talk about The Dear God. So I know it must be pretty bad. I've never even heard of it, frankly, aside from you.
They should have paid me to play it. I'm tempted to right now pull up to you and read to you what the game describes itself as. And then I will give you money to go and play that game. And then you tell me what you thought. Because it is... I saw what they were going for and they just didn't. It's like they showed up with a tennis racket to a baseball game. Like, it just didn't.
Well, listeners, if you want me to go through the hell that is The Dear God, chip in $5 for your monthly subscription service. And if we meet our goal, then I will subject myself to torture. Let's go. No, just kidding. Yeah, so thanks for tolerating that tangent, everybody. I think that's important to say. Tangents are great. I like tangents. So we talked about off mic, Ben, about rating the trilogy versus rating the games. Just out of curiosity, I think you and I have the same answer. What was your favorite game in this trilogy?
Okay. So
favorite and least favorite, or just rank them. Rank them favorite to least favorite.
Okay. Well, in my heart, like, I want to say I like Spyro the Dragon #1, but like, honestly, Year of the Dragon was exceptional for me in comparison. Zuko's Year of the Dragon, followed by Spyro the Dragon, followed by, in 5th place somehow, Ripto's Rage. So
Well, third place was taken up by Sergeant Bird's levels, and fourth place was taken up, interestingly, by Sparks the Dragonfly's levels.
There it is. Yep.
No, I'm right there with you, right? I think each game is better than the last objectively, but subjectively, Year of the Dragon for me was definitely the favorite. And yeah, Ripto is dead last for me. We could talk about why whenever we get into it, but yeah, I just didn't enjoy playing it, truthfully.
No. I feel you there.
So how do you want to do this, buddy? Do you want to go through each game one by one and sort of just talk about their story and go through generalities and like what we thought about it? You want to do that?
That's fine with me. I mean, let me. But before I do, I have to give you credit and a shout out where it's due. I appreciate all of the work and the laboring and the carrying that you did of getting down and writing so many thoughts, and I appreciate everything you're doing for this channel, Rick. That's what I'm trying to say. While we've been dealing with the wonderful issue of carpenter bees taking over the wood of our house, and as we're wrapping up choir seasons at the church, I'm looking forward to being more involved with you. But what I'm saying is thank you for digging so deep into this game in terms of the notes. But
well, I appreciate that.
No, it's credit where it's due, and I look forward to, if I dare to say, what's the word I'm looking for? Taking a little go at the old Sunshine game, if you know what I'm saying, because that makes my heart sing. So let's talk development and release of Spyro 1 first, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, sounds great to me.
So this was Insomniac Studios' second endeavor, that is Spyro the Dragon. It's not Spyro 1. That's not its name. What are you thinking? But Universal Interactive Studios backed Insomniac Studios. And the game was first unveiled at E3 in Atlanta in 1998, and it was released September 9, which is my brother and sister's birthday. I always try to find games that have birthdays or rather, games release dates that share birthdays. But that's a whole other tangent that I will spare you all.
The game that I play that shares my birthday? Tiger Woods PGA Tour every year, because Tiger Woods shares the birthday with me.
Are you serious?
He does.
I love this. This is fantastic.
And before we keep going, one thing that jumped out at me that I had written down is like, it is crazy to me that in the late 90s, Spyro 1, 2, and 3 were all released and developed within a year of each other.
Bonkers.
And they were still high quality.
Bonkers.
That's insane. Could you imagine that? Like, we've been waiting, 20 years for GTA 6 at this point? I've lost track.
Yeah. I think we're still waiting on Cyberpunk. So released in September of 98, and by December of 99, it sold 1 million units in North America. And originally, the Spyro games were supposed to be grittier and darker, and honestly, probably a T for teen, if anything. But the changes came with the idea that they could, cast a wider net to a wider market, because PlayStation was being quite literally run over by Nintendo in terms of the family game market, the children's games. Spyro was originally supposed to be named Pete, but then they were they were worried about copyright issues with Disney, so that would have been they would have lost. To be honest, they would have been flattened in the courts.
It would have been a whole new world for them if they tried to copyright with Disney.
And boom goes the dynamite. So Pyro was seen as too mature of a name, and that led them to go with Spyro, which is a perfect name. And Spyro was developed by the same man who created Crash Bandicoot. And Spyro was supposed to be green, but they feared he'd blend in with the grass, which is, can you imagine in the Unreal Engine what would have happened with him being green? He'd just be a blur on a blur.
It would have been tough, and honestly, him being purple gives it this extra fantasy element. Like, I mean, dragons inherently are fantasy creatures, but a purple dragon just, I don't know, like, I could imagine a green dragon existing before I could, like, a vibrant, majestic majesty purple dragon,
Yeah, and the purple and the yellow, I think, together give him a really nice dimension on those lush backgrounds. I think it makes a lot of sense. Also, while playing through Oh gosh, see, my brain is fried from all of the flames that have left the mouth of Spyro. After playing through Year of the Dragon and listening to Spyro's voice very carefully, I said, "Who's doing the voice of Spyro? Why does that sound so familiar? It's the same voice as SpongeBob."
Yeah, and Tom Kenny, he voiced Spyro in Spyro 2 and 3, and then he returned to do all of the voices for Spyro in the Reignited Trilogy. He also voices the Professor, which to me, anytime I heard the Professor, it was like hearing the Ice King from Adventure Time, because Tom Kenny voiced him too. And I was watching an interview with Tom Kenny, and the original voice actor for Spyro in Spyro 1 was this gentleman named Carlos. His last name started with A. I don't quite remember.
It was a different guy? I thought it was the same guy.
No, Spyro 1 was a different guy. And if you go back and listen to the original Spyro 1, not the Reignited Trilogy, but the original, it becomes painfully clear. He sounds like a nerd.
Yes, he does.
I want to kick Nasty Nork's butt.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know. I think Tom Kenny really knocked it out of the park. But he mentioned that whenever he was re-recording the lines, because the original quality was just so poor because, 1998, that they couldn't remaster it. Mm-hmm. So he was like, I wouldn't deliver these lines in the same way now that I've got 20 years of experience. And he was like, but fans can be very picky. So he just kind of tried to emulate it as best as he could. And honestly, it sounds like Spyro. It's almost exactly how I remember it.
Yeah, no, and that's just it. Like, the times have changed so much. A lot of TV shows will talk about, and dare I, this is going to sound like it's a wild step off the path, but 9/11 changed everything. No, hear me out here. The way that lines were delivered, the TV shows that survived, the TV shows that didn't make it past, it changed media forever. So, Spyro kind of being like, Nasty Nork, and all these kinds of things. Suddenly Nasty Nork's not so,
While we're on the topic, getting away from the topic of 9/11 and sticking with the topic of, I don't mean to no but you instead of yes and you, but to yes and your voice actor thing. Most of the voice actors, they got as many to stay on as they could. I was wondering if there were any that you particularly didn't care for, because there is one that I definitely did not like.
Of the
compared
voice?
To the original.
Of the characters that you didn't like?
In the Reignited Trilogy compared to the original, yes.
Okay, see, now I only played, the other two recently, so I don't know their voices by comparison. Elora's voice was okay, I guess, but it wasn't my favorite. I'm trying to think of...
I loved her voice. I was specifically thinking of Hunter.
Oh, yeah, Hunter. Yeah, well, more for me, it's the delivery than it is the voice itself.
Sure. The whole performance. Like, in the original, he was just kind of like a bigger brother, like, kind of dude. And in this one, he's, like, overly styled. Like, he reminds me of Sonic the Hedgehog. He's like, whoa, Spyro. Huh, I tried to catch Ripto, but I'm a scaredy cat. And, like, I don't know. Yeah. It goes to show you, I think, whenever you're doing any kind of performance, that sometimes less is more, and not everything needs to be hyper stylized. And I think this is just a great example. I don't know. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that others weren't improved. I went back and rewatched old clips of Spyro 1, and like when you release the dragons from the statues, it's like they just got somebody from another office to be like, thank you, Spyro. Nasty Nork is up ahead. And then in the new ones, they're like phenomenal. So,
yeah.
A lot of improvement.
The dragons' voices in the first Spyro were just great, I thought. And a nice wide variety. And I liked those little cutscenes, too, of the conversations. Didn't bother me, because there were cutscenes that bothered me, but I'll save those for later. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the music a little bit? So I never knew.
Yes, I do.
That the music was composed by the drummer for the Police, Stuart Copeland. Mm-hmm. I never knew that.
Yeah, and Stuart Copeland considers, and I'm not saying this sarcastically or facetiously or meanly, Stuart Copeland considers his music for Spyro to be some of the best music he's ever composed, which, like, go you, pat yourself on the back. But it is, as Rick, you and I've discussed this at length on the phone a few times, it's kind of bluesy and very repetitive chord structures in almost every level.
To me, it embodies, like, 90s 9 through 13-year-olds trying to just have a good time with video games, you know? Like, it's like, if you listen to it for like a minute, it's interesting. I mean, if you listen to it for 5 minutes, it's repetitive, but at a minute, it's interesting. But you could also just keep it in the background, and it's perfect background music. What I liked about it whenever I was, like, specifically listening to it was just how prominent the bass figured into everything. It was like somebody just, like, took the most active humbuckers, slapped them onto, like, a 6-string Peavey, and just, like, said, rock out, man. Like, the bass is so prevalent. It's so cool.
It was very tasty, and it was nice to it's kind of nice to have the bass. It was tastefully foreground, and it was background when it needed to be, which we might be going off on a bit of a music tear here because of, that thing we've done before. But yeah, no, I thought that the bass, it wasn't annoying or obnoxious either. It was tastefully done, I thought. And exactly, you hit the nail on the head there with that. It feels like that 9 to 13-year-old, like, yeah, I'm just trying to have fun. And then it, like, bounces to, like, that kind of 4 chord with, like, a little bit of a picardy third feel. And then it's, like, back to, like, minor 1 and then major 1. And you're like, okay, settle down. Like, I get it.
There's a lot of modality throughout a lot of these tracks. Like, I was really pleased at how often the flat 7 was present.
Yes, it was.
There were even a couple of times when there was a flat 2. Like, I was like, all right, man, like, let's go. Like,
dude, that lower 2, that's where it's at.
There was there's like this joke that's prevalent on the internet that, like, the genre of ska music is like what 13-year-olds hear when they get extra mozzarella sticks. Have you heard that before?
No, but that's accurate.
It's so accurate. And, like, I think about that, and then I think about, like, you know, they eat their sticks and they get home to play video games. Like, this is the music. Like, it's just like a natural progression, really. Ska into Spyro.
Oh yeah. I mean, for me, I always associate ska with Tony Hawk, but I digress. Yeah. So, former drummer for the Police. Good work, I should say. Do you want to get us rocking and rolling with, gameplay, story, etc.?
Yeah, let's talk about how the game plays, the mechanics. So, you're playing in third person as Spyro the Dragon. Spyro, it's interesting, the first game actually came out before PlayStation integrated the joysticks onto their controllers, which, I remember playing it that way, and as a kid, like, I just didn't know any better, but it's a definite, like this is a joystick kind of game. Like, you just gotta. And you move around. The camera has 2 settings, passive and active. I didn't really find them to be all that different. The camera is generally okay. It gets caught into weird angles, particularly underwater. Underwater, the camera goes to complete shit. But otherwise, the camera's mostly okay with a few hiccups. But you do have control of that with the right stick should you choose to handle that. Spyro has a couple of moves. You can press X or cross, however you prefer to think about that button, on PlayStation. To jump, you can double press it to glide. Square is a charge. You do a charge headbutt. That also gives you a lot of speed, which feels really good to do. It feels really weighty in the Reignited Trilogy. Circle gives you a fire breath. Triangle will enter you into first-person mode if you want to look around. It also was integrated into the flying mechanic in the second one, but we'll talk about that in a bit. And there are also rolls. You can do little dodge rolls with the shoulder buttons. I literally never used those, not even once.
No.
As far as the first one, I think that's about it as far as mechanics go, right?
I think so. Now, did you play Spyro on your PlayStation? Is that what you played the Reignited Trilogy on?
No, I bought the Reignited Trilogy on Steam, and I have to say, it looks just beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
completely upscaled. Like I've got a 2080, so not quite like one tier below yours a little bit, but you know, everything, it was maxing out at 144 FPS, which is what my monitor is. Everything was super high detail. It looks just beautiful.
Would you say it looks unreal?
I would say that
Would
they should do something with that.
I like the Unreal combustible something. I don't know. Maybe the I don't. No.
Who do I call? I've already mailed a letter to my address with that idea, so it's copyrighted.
Yep. Don't open it. It's safe in there. No, I played it on the Switch. That's why I asked, because I was like, you're saying triangle and square and circle and X. And I'm like, yeah, PlayStation. And then I'm sitting here like, wait, what buttons did I press? Yes, I did it.
Yeah,
on the Switch.
how did it perform on the Switch? Did you like notice any differences between docked versus handheld or anything like that?
No, it was as smooth as it could possibly be. Minimal erroring. Now, I will say my TV is a little old. It's a flat screen and it still has, an HDMI, but it's like probably a 2011, 2012 downstairs. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes when it gets frustrated with high level graphics, it shuts off and turns itself back on. And it did that once or twice on the TV, but there was generally fair warning. So it performed great on the Switch.
Interesting. I think actually that segues nicely into bugs. And we could probably just do bugs as like a one-off thing because, if there's going to be a bug, it's probably, gonna be present in some aspects of every part of the game. Did you notice any bugs?
I had no bugs other than sparks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ben.
No.
I did actually have a couple bugs. The main bug was, and it particularly happened in Ripto's Rage, but it did happen a couple of other times in Year of the Dragon. Sometimes the cutscenes just had no sound. And I generally play things with subtitles, like 70% of the time. So it wasn't a huge deal, but, it's definitely noticeable. I mean, there's no sound for God's sake.
Yeah, I'm sorry that happened to you. I had literally, other than my television shutting off and turning itself back on, otherwise I had no bugs.
Yeah, oh, cool. Good to know.
I thought the Switch would have crashed, though, to be honest with you.
Wrong franchise, buddy.
I knew you would do that to me. I knew you would do that.
You set me up and I take a shot. Yeah. So do you want to move into the story for the first one? It's pretty simplistic.
Yeah, it was a pretty simple story. Not that we need to dissect every single twist and turn, because there's plenty to do in this game. It'll keep you busy if you're trying to do everything 100%. Which was definitely not my goal playing through these. I didn't know how much you tried to 100% anything, but I wasn't gunning for that necessarily.
Oh, yeah, that's actually, thank you for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so how the game plays is you go through a series of homelands. In the first world, home worlds they're called. In the first game, you've got the artisans, the peacekeepers, the magic crafters, the beast makers, and the Dreamweavers. In each of these worlds, there are going to be a set of portals, usually like, 4 or 5?
Approximately. Let me take a quick peek here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we've got 5 in artisans, if you don't include the flights. So yeah, actually more like 5 or 6 in each of them, yeah.
Okay. And the way that you progress in Spyro 1 is you are saving dragons that have been turned to stone by the main antagonist, Nasty Nork. Nasty Nork, this is getting into the story a little bit. Nasty Nork in the very beginning is watching like a TV broadcast. And it's basically a dragon saying like, yeah, we're all good and living peacefully. This Nasty Nork guy, he's the worst. And he calls them ugly, which is what makes Nasty Nork snap. Like all good, nice guys and incels. he's ugly. That's it. I'm going to cause physical violence, which he does. He does this spell that just magically turns every dragon except for Spyro into stone, into statues. So that's how we're progressing through the first game, is we're collecting a certain number of statues, dragon statues, bringing them back, and that's how you progress through. The other component of the game is collecting gems. And every world, every home world and every world within has a certain number of gems, and you got to collect those too. So this game is sort of in equal parts. Well, no, I guess it's completely like a collectum quest. It's just dividing the collectum into quest-based items like dragon statues or dragon eggs and the gems, right? The gems for me was the main thing. Like, it was more enjoyable than fighting enemies. It was more enjoyable than the boss fights. Like to me, this game excels the most as a collect 'em all.
Yeah, for me, it was the dragons, actually. It was setting them free. That was more of the thing that called to me. I don't know. That's what I liked.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely better than collecting orbs, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But that's how you progress through the games. Typically, in the first game, you've got to collect a certain number of dragon statues or gems to progress to the next home world. So, for example, in the Artisans, there is a balloon pilot, a gentleman flying a hot air balloon, and I think, do you need a certain number of gems or a certain number of dragons? It's dragons, right?
I thought it was dragons.
Yeah, a certain number of dragons to progress to the next world. Now, what this means is that, in theory, you don't have to play every single level. You can get however many dragons is required of you and then progress onward. And this tracks for the rest of the series, too. So, in some ways, although I think you and I have probably played every level, it's not required.
Technically speaking, no. To go back to the 100% thing that I had mentioned earlier, the only thing that I cared about 100%ing was the dragons, and I don't know why, but I was just like, no, I'm setting you free. So, to that end, I guess we both did probably play every level, but you're right, you don't need to, which is strange to think about.
I kind of like it. I like that it leaves room for error. I like that there are more quest items, whether they're dragons, dragon eggs, or whatever, available than what is necessary. And I like that it gives you that kind of freedom, so you're not feeling compelled to 100% it, but it's there as an option for you. I think that's pretty good, because there were some levels, specifically in Ripto and a little bit in Year of the Dragon, that I just wanted to quit and not play anymore. So I did not want to 100% them. But the levels in the original are much more simplistic, I would say.
And not in a low-brow way at that. Because, something can be simple and kind of like, okay, I get it. This is just whatever. No, it's still a very beautiful, artful game with a good spirit. But it is very simple. I mean, defeating enemies, getting gems, freeing dragons. Okay, and you've been told that that's what you're supposed to do throughout the entirety of the game. Fair, I'm in. In fact, my favorite platformers explain things pretty thoroughly.
And explaining. Explaining is another part of this game that I wanted to talk about, maybe before we go into the ins and outs of the story. And that's, we talked last, Ben, you and I, about Majora's Mask, right?
Yes.
What I loved about Majora's Mask is the onboarding process takes you through pretty much every mechanic that is going to be useful for the game and lets you experiment with it in a safe way, right? So the first time you have to reset the clock, which is scary. It's a scary thing to do. The game does it in a way that's safe and ensures you that, you're going to lose stuff that you can gain back, but these are the consequences. Just, do you know what I mean? I'm not explaining that very well.
Nope. You're making they give you the bumpers on your first throw down the alley.
Yeah, exactly. They, Yeah, that bowling analogy is perfect. What I like about that is it integrates it diegetically into the game in a way that makes sense. In Spyro, when you free your first dragon, because as soon as you start out, there's a dragon in front of you, you free him, and I don't remember exactly if this is the dragon that says this, or if this is exactly what he says, because there are so many that constantly say things like this, but you'll free a dragon, and they'll say, "Thanks for freeing me, Spyro. That jump over there looks pretty far away, huh? If you just press the X button at the top of your jump, you'll get the farthest glide." Or like, "Thanks for freeing me, Spyro. If you ever get lost, just press the triangle button." Like, it takes you so far out of the experience. It's not diegetic because they would never talk like that, you know? And I think that's lazy. I mean, it is lazy. It was acceptable back then because video games were more in their infancy. I mean, there were definitely games that were not doing that. Let's be fair. And it is a children's game, like at heart.
Right.
There's no getting around that. It was their whole thing against Nintendo. So I can see an argument being made for it being explicit like that. I'm just saying, to me, I don't like that kind of thing. I think it fits in here. I just don't like it.
No, and I think you're exactly right. I think whenever we get into children's games, especially of that era, there's a lot of that explaining. Now, how they hold your hand to teach you these things, I think that's what separates certain games of that era in terms of like their level of creativity. So like, for example, Banjo-Kazooie, you've got Bottles, and you know, Bottles is there and is like, and you're like, ah, yes, I will press B and do this move instead. Great, somebody's there to teach me. But the fact that the dragon like breaks the fourth wall and is like, "Hey, thanks for freeing me. Push these buttons." You're like, huh?
Now, I haven't played Banjo, but that does kind of sound like the same thing. My preferred, like, if I were designing Spyro, like if I'm gonna backseat game design, I would have just put it like whenever you run into the fairies that save your progress, sometimes they'll say something to you, and then an extra box pops up that just says, like, press triangle to do this. That's how I would have just done the whole thing. But again, since it is for children, there is a benefit to having everything read out loud. So I get it. I mean, I think it's objectively good. I'm still allowed to not like it, but it's objectively good. Does that make sense? I've kind of done a 180 on this, haven't I? As we're talking in real time.
No, I think I'm following you. I guess. No, you know what? No, I think I follow you.
Cool. So is there anything else that we should talk about before we dive into what the plot actually is, and maybe talk about some, levels that we might have liked or disliked?
You mean talking about the story past calling Nasty Nork ugly and causing him to go on a rampage,
which is admittedly like 50% of the story.
I mean, it is. That's just what it is. There's nothing else to really talk about here. Yeah, it just, we start at the very beginning in the artisan world. And the artisan world houses a number of levels within, and those levels are, well, you obviously have the artisan home, but then you have Stone Hill, Dark Hollow, Town Square, Toasty, and Sunny Flight. Rick, I have to ask your feelings about how you feel about the levels that exist within Artisans. Did you have any that were your particular favorite? How did you feel about Toasty? I'm curious to know.
I don't have any notes written down, nor do I have any strong memories of any level standing out to me. I think I remember Dark Hollow being my favorite.
It's mine too, actually.
Toasty, I didn't remember this boss when I first played him, because, as I said, I didn't play this game as a kid, not this installment. When I first saw Toasty, as a 28-year-old man, I was like, that's kind of badass. Like, that's edgy for a children's game.
Right?
But then the boss fight against Toasty is pretty underwhelming because really he just stands there until you flame him, and you only have to do that 3 times. So assuming that you can chase him and get to where he is, and that is to say defeating the enemies along the way, you're fine.
Yeah, the enemies along the way were actually harder than the boss itself.
Were the enemies those sheepdogs, if I'm remembering correctly?
Yes, they were.
I died to those so many times because times. they can do it like a double. They can do like a double dip on you.
Yes, they can.
You know,
and they will.
Yeah. So we should say, as you're going through the game, there are going to be different kinds of enemies. Some enemies can be defeated by either headbutting or flaming them. Some enemies will have something special, like maybe armor, so you have to headbutt them. And some enemies might be just too big, so you can't headbutt them, you have to flame them. But every enemy can be defeated in some way by those 2 basic moves. One of the 2. And same can be said with gem containers, excuse me. Some chests are made of metal, so you need to headbutt them. Some are just standard, so you can do whichever you'd like. There are some that you have to use special means, such as finding a rocket that's placed in the level and flaming that rocket. But those are rarer and fewer in between.
Yeah, they don't get. I don't want to say it's not creative, but you don't have a very large, wild Swiss Army knife in the grand scheme of this game. I will say something that I experienced. First of all, I agree, Dark Hollow is my favorite too. Not that I don't like Town Square and all those kinds of places, but Dark Hollow is my favorite. I have to say, I think there were a few moments just throughout the game, and not to get ahead of myself here, but throughout Spyro the Dragon, that the boss fights were almost easier than some of the enemies. And that was, for me, that was a point that kind of dragged the score down for me, to be honest, because I like a really satisfying boss fight. Like Girahim in Skyward Sword is one of the finest bosses I've ever fought. But in this game, it was like left me wanting a little bit more. Like, swing your scythe at me, Toasty. Slay me.
For sure. There were definitely sometimes it's some of the monsters that are within the world combined with the level design that can make things a little bit almost more challenging than the bosses themselves. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So going through Spyro 1, the story really just revolves on getting back to Nasty Nork and confronting him. There's really no story beats. You just go from place to place until you reach him. And the fight with him, I thought was a little underwhelming because he kind of just runs away from you.
10 times over, it was underwhelming.
Yeah. And then once you beat Nasty Nork, this is a trope that stays within the Spyro games throughout. The ending is like a little like TV interview with Spyro, and it's like kind of cute because like you can there's very clearly like a boom mic and a mic arm in the scene, like just endearingly amateur, and that's really kind of it. Like, it's a happily ever after thing. Again, like we said at the top, there's not really a whole lot to the story for this whole trilogy. It gets more in depth with the next 2 games, but yeah, Spyro 1, this is something else that I've been thinking about a lot with games. Not everything has to be about something. A game like this that has a very standard, light story, subsists on its gameplay, and that's totally fine. I'm kind of getting into the territory of how I feel about It Takes Two, if I'm being honest, which is an episode that we'll release a little bit later, or is already in your feed if you are listening to this in like 2050. But yeah, it's okay for a game to be simple and to just survive on its gameplay. I mean, that's literally how Mario came to be. It's fine.
It's how Mario started. Definitely not how Mario is now, but I mean,
yeah, for sure.
you've got that big through line, and there's not many appendages off of it. Like Spyro is kind of like just a big old tube. You know where you're going, you know what to do. It's kind of straight through. We played Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask is a little bit more like a web. You go kind of off the path every once in a while, and you can do different things that are not necessarily just in the main tube. And then you get other games where they just kind of throw you in the middle of a field, like a Skyrim, and they're like, "Hey, find your own tube, kid." Like that, you know what I mean? It's just, and there's nothing wrong with just, okay, we have a main story of get nasty Nork and help other dragons. Okay, that's fine.
And to that, you add good level design, good mechanics, and good music, along with like a collect 'em all element. Like, of course, 90s kids are going to eat that up.
Oh, yeah.
I believe, I might be speaking out of turn. I believe Pokemon came out just before this, if I'm remembering correctly.
I believe you're right. I will let you know momentarily. Yeah, Pokemon was 96, I believe.
I think 96 is right. The collect 'em all thing was like, I mean, it's still popular, but it was super popular back then. So, and there was a collect 'em all element to similar platformers like Crash and Croc, too.
1996. We're good.
There we go. So, yeah, I'm just looking through my notes here. I think my favorite level design in the entire game is a toss-up between either Peacekeepers, which is like a desert-style place, quite big desert-style place that was really fun to explore. There are little cannons that you can take from the enemy and shoot down like the enemy or gem casings or whatever. I also really liked Beastmaker's world.
Really?
It was kind of like a dark swamp, and everybody is like comically Bayou Cajun. Comically so.
Yes, they are. Not for the sake of the show. I sincerely, from my heart, my two favorites were actually Magic Crafters and Dreamweavers. Those I absolutely loved. Dreamweavers is just whimsical and everything's like pink and blue and fluffy and there's like magic everywhere. It's kind of crazy. Nobody from the Bayou there. Nobody Cajun there. And Magic...
They don't belong there.
No, they don't.
Get them out of there.
Abba-dee-ba-dabba. And the Magic Crafters, that's for you, Priscilla, wherever you are. Magic Crafters, I thought that was maybe one of like, that's kind of what I would have expected from a game like Spyro. A game about dragons is a place where there's a bunch of wizards who are trying to do battle with you. You know what I mean? And it was just fun. Pure fun.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that we're both in the same Google Doc. A lot of the level designs I described as, quote, generic fantasy, but I didn't mean that with any sort of criticism or anything like that. Like, I'm not obfuscating like my opinions on it. Like, the generic fantasy to me is like there's greenery, varying degrees of greenery and styles of greenery. There's water, platforming. I just didn't know how to describe it without writing full paragraphs, which I didn't want to do.
No.
But I think as far as the quote generic fantasy goes, in the first game, Magic Crafters is definitely the best one.
Well, and believe it or not, I actually wasn't in the Google Doc whenever I was saying that. I was I was refreshing my memory on the IGN website walkthrough thing, and I was looking at all of the stuff. So I must have
Somebody's in the Google Doc.
I have it up, but I wasn't looking at it.
Oh, I gotcha. This one also had my favorite boss design, which was Blowhard. Blowhard is a literal wizard, but he doesn't have a body or legs. He is just a head with a very long beard and arms. And that's it.
Yeah. Classic Blowhard. Also, this was just another example of, oh man, getting to you was harder than fighting you.
Yeah. Blowhard, that stage was a little harder to navigate for me than Toasty. Still super easy, but like the design was just so charming. You know, Toasty really set it up for everything being kind of edgy, and they didn't really cash that check. They didn't keep that pace going, which is fine. But yeah, the beard with no body, I just think that's hilarious.
Classic. Trying to remember who was actually like the hardest of the mini, I don't want to say mini bosses, but of each of the world's bosses in this game. Maybe Jacques. How was Metalhead again? I forget how Metalhead was.
It's hard to say. Like, I didn't really find any of them overtly challenging.
No.
I fell off a lot in Blowhard's level, and I think it was a camera issue.
Yeah.
So that might be my pick. Or maybe just Nasty Nork himself.
Yeah, Nasty Nork took some coordination to defeat, but I don't mean like coordination like someone's, doing a backflip using stasis on a rock, shooting the rock with a bomb arrow in Breath of the Wild. Like, it's not much finesse. It's just keep yourself going there. Keep chasing him. Oh, he's running away again. Go get him. Like, that's okay, I guess. That works.
And that's another thing that this series does really well is there's always a sense of forward momentum, particularly with battles like that. With some of them like Toasty, there's less so. But I think as they went on to Ripto and to Year of the Dragon, that forward momentum was really pertinent to keeping my patience and my attention. And I'm 28. I'm not a child. So like,
sure.
That sense of forward momentum, which again, we'll talk about this in the next game. That momentum was completely lost anytime you went underwater for me. But otherwise was really good. Like, the series does that really well.
Agreed.
With that, do you want to move to Ripto's Rage? Is there anything else that you want to add a little nightcap to Spyro 1?
I mean, I might need a nightcap after talking about Ripto's Rage, but
I feel like we're building Ripto's Rage up as being this really horrible game.
It betrayed me. Like,
it missed the mark.
Not to sound dramatic here, but yeah, it wasn't the same. I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit of development, and then we can start the story of Ripto's Rage?
Yeah. So again, I think objectively we could say that it largely was an improvement on Spyro 1. It used the same engine. All the mechanics are the same for the most part. Everything was improved, and critics noticed that. It generally was concluded as being just a better version of Spyro 1 with a little more personality and better mechanics. It was officially announced again at E3, and it was released at the end of 1999. So again, this is like right off the heels of Spyro 1. A quote that I found from the product development director, Amy Blair, said the following: Spyro 2 isn't just another sequel. Players will surely be lured by Spyro's playful antics, but they'll experience gameplay that's more challenging and more fun than ever before. Now, I know I'm wearing 2021 goggles, but Amy, that ain't it.
Yeah,
that ain't it.
Amy, you lied to me, Amy. You tried.
I like Spyro's playful antics. I'll give you that. And the addition of Tom Kenny in the original, great.
That was, power move, Tom Kenny. But yeah, this, please, I don't want to interrupt your flow, my friend.
No, that was really where it was going to end. Like,
yeah.
I think that's good product development director speak.
Yes.
Which is her job. So you did your job very well, Amy Blair. I just don't think that opinion holds up to me.
Can I tell you what I was going to say? May I tell you?
Yeah.
With my hands on my cheeks like this. They can't see me, so they have to imagine me doing this. No. Do you remember Aladdin 2 Return of Jafar?
I could get up and grab a VHS copy of that in under 5 minutes if I had to right now.
Are you kidding me?
I am not kidding you. But yes, that is to say I do remember.
Yeah. And it wasn't in theaters. You know that? It was straight to DVD, which is kind of what Ripto's Rage felt like to me. It kind of felt like I see what they're doing, and you know, there are some improvements, not gonna lie, but there were a lot of moments where I was like, this feels like the leftovers of the original in some ways. I'm not saying that it's bad. It just they tried to do some things that there were some cutscenes that I just struggled to get through in Ripto's Rage and other things. But I'm going off the rails. Forgive me.
No, it's okay. Did you feel some of the shortcomings and leftovers, as you said? Did you feel that those were in mechanical execution, or like their ideas for objectives for players? Because I definitely feel the latter. Specifically thinking about the orbs.
The orbs is everything. And then the cutscenes, in my opinion, sometimes cutscenes can be fun. Like whenever they're like the bird puts the bomb in the helmet of the slug or whatever that thing was. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I've seen this 5 times. You know, I only need to see it once, but maybe for some kids that's engaging. For me, as a little one, I liked to use my imagination for like those kinds of things. And that's not me discounting anyone's imagination or lack thereof. They were a little bit laborious to get through and a little bit annoying. And on the subject of orbs, because I feel like we're going to volley the orb back and forth here a little bit. You and I were talking the other day on the phone, and Alora says, "Oh yeah, there are orbs to collect." And I'm not going to get the exact quote here, but I'll explain later what they're for, what you need them for. And when did she tell us about what we needed them for?
Pretty much towards the end, certainly in the latter half of the game.
So Uncle Ben rolls in, and I can say that because I am an uncle. Uncle Ben rolls up to the last part of the game, and they're like, "Oh, surprise, we need at least 800,000 more orbs." And I was like, "Oh, good thing I got 5. Like, anyway, I digress.
And the thing about the orbs that frustrated me about this, one was it took a very human element that was rescuing your friends and family from statues and sterilized it.
Yes, it did. That's a really great way of putting that.
And they walked back on this decision with Year of the Dragon, where you save eggs. But the main thing is, as like a gameplay element that bothered me, was that in this game, to get to new worlds, you largely relied on your gems. You paid this awful character named Moneybags, who we'll talk about in a minute, to progress forward, or you just collected gems. Am I misremembering this? Because I don't remember the orbs like being necessary. You either collected gems to pay Moneybags to go forward or unlock portals, or you complete the level and collect a talisman. Now, The talisman in each level has absolutely no fail state to get it unless you just don't make it to the end of the level, which we should say. The level design in Ripto's Rage it's just better than the first one. The levels are longer, they're more involved, and often the quote-unquote end is like in the middle. So there's still a lot to explore, which I think is great. And I'll talk about exploration more in a bit because I really like that about this one and the next one specifically. Okay, so in this game, we'll get to mechanics in just a second, but there are new mechanics. When you learn a new mechanic, you can then go back to older worlds to explore a little bit of a new area. I think that's good game design, because in the first one, I had absolutely no incentive to go back to older worlds unless I really wanted to collect those 5 gems that I'm missing. In this one, you cannot collect all of the gems typically because you'll have like swimming underwater that you have to do, and you haven't learned that yet. I didn't feel that incentive with the orbs. And here's why. Oftentimes, the orbs range in difficulty between just talking to somebody and then doing some awful fetch quest. But also, when you go back to a world to get the orbs, you have to clear the whole level again. And this is triflingly annoying in the sense of just killing monsters, and really annoying in the sense of killing monsters to unlock special power-ups and portals that you need to progress, or killing monsters to have the NPCs guide you through the rest of the level. This was really tedious to me, just really arduous. I didn't feel like it was respecting my time very well. Like, there's just the mechanics here just are not working with each other, I don't think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything to add. I mean, the mechanics of the game I was not upset with, but the orb stuff was very frustrating. And again, I agree. The end of the level and the middle of the level was kind of neat because you could actually go further.
Do you want to talk about the new mechanics that are in this game?
There were a couple of new things that you could learn for the right price. Which,
we'll get to that.
Oh my God, I just want to rip into him now. And not that way. Yeah, there were some new mechanics that were brought about in this game. There was the quote hover. They called it a hover. It really kind of was a hover, but not really. It was just like a little boost, a little bump at the end of your flight, which, I think it's X on the Switch controller to get you to...
I love this mechanic. I think it's great.
Oh, it's lovely, and it was very helpful. And that little extra, 3 feet that you could go, 2 feet that you could go, made a difference in what they could do with the game, and I liked that.
And it showed in the level design. Like, they specifically designed some parts of the level where you had to use that along with the dash and jump glide. Otherwise, you weren't going to make that jump.
And they peppered it throughout the game in a tasteful way where you weren't sure until the moment it happened whether you were going to need to press it or not. And I really respect them for doing that because they didn't handhold. They didn't say, oh, you might need to go a little further on this jump, Spyro. Like, nobody did that. And if they would have, I would have just started getting really pissy. So there's that. There's also the fact that you can swim now. Surprise.
Yeah, water no longer kills you.
Also, fire does somehow. What? Yeah, you can swim. Super. And then the last... What was that last? There were a couple of extra abilities. There's that one that was was it called a rock smash? What is that thing?
The head bash?
The head bash, which I
think that was integrated in the third Spyro.
I think it came at the end of...
Did it?
At the end of Ripto's, yeah. Cause our friend, is like, by the way, go back and do this. And I'm like, I'm gonna just take this horn. Yeah, then there's the super powered fly, and the super dash and the defense powers. I mean, that stuff's cool. I don't know how you felt about that. I really liked it.
I thought they were great, and I thought they added a really nice variety. We should say those last couple, the super powered versions of the mechanics, they're accessed through special arcs that you pass through. And when you pass through those arcs, you activate the power-up, and they're only good for a certain amount of time. So they are time-based. They're generally pretty generous. Like, I never found myself running out in regards to what my tasks were. Except for maybe the area with the mechanical spiders, or the giant spiders. That was a bit tricky. Yes. But otherwise, yeah, I thought it added great variety. I again, the mechanics are great. Mm-hmm. Aside from the camera sometimes, and everything underwater, the mechanics are great. Agreed.
Would you like me to ignite the storytelling portion of this particular game?
Yeah, just 2 quick more things. The score, same deal as before. Stuart Copeland. The graphics, minorly improved, nothing crazy. We are only a year since the last one. And yeah, why don't you take us off with the story?
All right, so you've just helped all of the dragons. You've set them free. They're all happy. You're going on vacation, you've decided. And yeah, it's raining in Dragon Shores, and you jump through a portal, and you're intercepted and brought into the world of Avalar by the Professor, Elora, and Hunter. They're trying to get a dragon to deal with Ripto, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, so Ripto is the main baddie in this game. You learn a little bit about him later, but just to get his origin story out right here, Ripto essentially came to this world by accident. Total accident, because Hunter was fiddling with the professor's portal, which caused Ripto to shoot out, along with his cronies, who we'll talk about soon because I can't find them in the list right now. But anyway, Ripto came out basically because Hunter was fucking with everything of the professors, and Ripto's entire motivation for being here is that there are no dragons. Like, that's his whole thing. He comes out, he realizes there are no dragons, and then he's like, this is as good of a place to rule as ever.
Yep.
And that's really his entire motivation as a villain, is I don't like dragons. Like, I'm sorry. I know video games were in their infancy, but writing was not. This is one of the worst villains I've ever encountered in a video game. Just like, look at a sheet of paper laying on a hardwood floor. He's even flatter than that. His character is just so flat.
Yeah, and that, if I can speak to that, I think that's what made me so frustrated with Ripto is, it's him, Crush, and Gulp. That's his posse. And there's not even like, with most people, with most enemies, or as they say in the movie Big Fish, most things that are evil are actually just misunderstood. No, he's just a jerk. There's no other... There could have been an opportunity to talk about, like, why doesn't he like dragons? Or, like, some sort of backstory. Or, like, I'm not saying we need to turn it into some sort of, like, message about we should all love each other. But, like, it's just, I hate dragons. Why? Because I do. Okay? What else? I hate dragons. Okay, so you're just going to take over this place? Yeah. What's in it for you, buddy? Like, I mean, Palpatine, the ultimate villain, right? Like, there's all sorts of things. Ripto was the opposite of Palpatine. He was just bad. Period.
Palpatine's foil. Yeah.
Palpatine is...
Can you even call him a foil? He doesn't really have any personality traits. I don't think foil is the right word. Antithesis to Palpatine.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, on the scale of villainy, that's... Ripto really was left a lot to be desired to that end.
This is another good case, too, with the voice actor for Ripto. I don't remember if it's the same voice actor, but the delivery of the lines of Ripto in this one, much like Hunter, are just hyper-stylized. Like, you broke my scepter. Or like, I hate dragons. It's stylized to the point of, like, I'm already not taking this character seriously because he has no motivation. Now he's become a caricature of a villain. Like, this isn't scary.
No.
But then again, maybe that's why Spyro doesn't take him seriously either. And he's just constantly like, I'm going to kick your butt.
Valid. Could be the case. Yeah, so basically you're brought in there to defeat Ripto, and your inspiration for beating Ripto is just because you want to help these people out. There's really nothing in it for you, to be honest.
Yeah, Spyro really does fit the trope of, like, the good-hearted good boy that's just gonna do right for the sake of doing right. And that's a more forgivable trope than a villain who is just a jerk with no motivation, It
is.
At least Spyro has a personality.
Spyro kind of reminds me, in this game, at least a little bit of, like, and I know that you know who Max Esmus is, but just, like, happy to be there, happy to, like, do their best and to help, and just all-around good guy. But, like, again, Ripto is, like, I mean, I would probably punch Ripto, too. Like, I wouldn't sit there and try to figure out how to push Ripto's buttons. There are no buttons. I don't know.
Right. The story really continues from there. The only major story beat is at one point, the professor develops a portal that is powered through crystals, and Ripto manages to steal the crystals for his scepter. He loses his scepter when he first lands in Avalar because Gulp eats it. Because, for every villain, you've got to have a dopey sidekick, which is Gulp. So he steals that. That's really the main story beat outside of the whole premise of them coming there. Spyro eventually just defeats him anyway.
Yep.
And peace returns to Avalar. And everything is good. And he finally gets his vacation that he so desperately wanted.
Yeah. I think we've covered the game. I think that's it, right? We can move on, right? Just kidding.
Well, we
I'm
should.
kidding.
We've definitely covered the story. The main difference in the gameplay for this one, so there are a few. Now, instead of collecting dragons, like we said before, you collect talismans. There is only one talisman per level, and once you get that talisman, you're free to move on to the next world. You're still collecting gems. Gems are a little more important in this one. And then there are also the orbs. You could feasibly get through an entire level without collecting a single orb if you really wanted to. Again, I don't think this is great level design. But anyways, now when you defeat enemies as well, they don't drop gems. So all of the gems are found scattered or in casings of some sort. But when you defeat an enemy, you get what's called a skill point, I believe. And the skill points are important because they unlock special power-ups throughout the level. So that might be a little super jump to get you up high. It might be a super flight to carry you across platforms. It varies. So defeating enemies, whether it's your first time through the level or whether you're coming back just to collect a couple spare gems, essentially becomes mandatory. I don't like this. They did move back to enemies just dropping gems for Year of the Dragon. But yeah, this just seemed like a mechanic that they thought was cool, but it ended up, like you said early on, Ben, just not working. It felt like a leftover.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong, I loved the power-ups. Sincerely, that was a great addition. But the fact that you had to take out enemies and then, enough enemies and then... So, well, I don't want to jump ahead to the last game, so I won't do that. But exactly what you're saying. You get the talismans, and that's how you get to the next level. Fine. And I understand the need of the talismans because they told us at the very beginning the need for the talismans. Not the case with the orbs. Very frustrating. And now, when you take out enemies, you're getting skill points so that you can unlock things. Well, and, I might have used those power-ups more had I known how many orbs I would have needed to pace myself for. Because I think, just anyway. Yeah. So the first place we are is Summer Forest in Glimmer, correct? Whenever we're going through Ripto's Rage.
Yes, Glimmer brought back, I distinctly remember going to Walmart, or it may have even been Kmart as a child with my grandpa, and I got this game and another PS1 classic called Rampage. And I remember, talk about a fun game to cover. That would be a blast.
Oh my gosh, it might be a short one, but man, it would be good. Please keep going though.
But no, I remember Glimmer like the back of my hand. Like this was the first Spyro thing that I ever played, and I played it so many times because I think when I first got the game, I didn't have a memory card, so I just had to play it over and over again. Yeah. I got a memory card like the next week because I realized, no. But yeah, Glimmer, I like Glimmer. There's little chinchillas and hard hats everywhere. You got to help them out. And it also introduces my least favorite character in the whole game, Moneybags. Can I talk about Moneybags for a second?
I think you should go to town.
Okay, sorry, there were fireworks
I heard.
Outside. So Moneybags is essentially a character that exists solely for a mechanic. He is a bipedal bear in a tuxedo with a monocle holding literally a bag with a big dollar sign on it. I mean, I think it's actually a gem, but he exists solely to take your money. And in the notes here, I have written, I just type brief sentences, but it's we grew up with characters like this. Of course, so many kids and people our age hate capitalism. Because these guys Moneybags is the worst. He deliberately blocks your progress via some strangely supernatural means. Like he's able to construct a rock bridge seemingly just with a snap of his fingers, or, teach you how to swim, which apparently you just forgot how to use your body until you pay him money. But all of these are hidden behind paywalls that range between 100 gems to like 1,000, 2,000 gems. And he is everywhere. In Ripto's Rage, he generally is preventing you from crossing bridges, accessing power-ups, getting into certain areas, and then, like I said, preventing you from doing basic mechanics like climbing. So whether you want to explore or just have bodily autonomy, you have to pay money bags. I hate it.
It's horrible. Money walls are always frustrating.
I will say, though, this, like, I hate him as a character. It did promote more gem exploration and collecting gems, which I was doing anyway because I like that part of the game. Yeah. But just strictly as a character, like, fuck Moneybags. He's the
capitalistic monster. Like, come on. Not saying that capitalism is all bad, but I am saying that Moneybags being like, hey there, so I can be a good person for the right price. I'm like, yes, my least favorite kind of person. Voiced by Jean-Benoit Blanc. That's who did the voice.
The voice actor is great.
Fantastic.
Let's just say that,
fantastic voice actor, but as a man who was born in Paris, France, of all places.
So what worlds in this game did you end up liking the most?
I like literally any of like the flight levels. I just love them, and it is what it is. I grew up loving Rogue Squadron on N64. So anything that I can fly in is a great love of mine. I feel so bad, Rick, because as I reflect on the levels and I try to think of ones that I liked, and even as I try to like look at names and see if anything like sparks, like, oh man, I really loved it. No, I didn't like a lot of the levels in this game. I'm trying to. I had such. As soon as I got to the end and they were like, oh yeah, we need the orbs. And I was like, you need what now? I would have gotten these. You couldn't have made the levels unlockable by getting orbs. I would have gathered orbs. Like you monsters. I don't know. Did you have a favorite level? I'll think on it.
I had a couple, yeah. So the two that I really liked a lot were, and there are more than two, but these stand out to me. Colossus, which is like an ice, or not ice, excuse me. It's like a vaguely Tibetan area with chanting monks. And all the monks, like there are statues of monks everywhere and they're all holding hockey sticks. And at the very end, you get to play a little hockey against the worst goalkeeper to have ever lived, which is really, it's cute fun. This game introduced mini games, we should say. And hockey is one of the first ones you can do. I also really liked the Scalos Badlands, the caveman level.
See, that one didn't get me.
I liked it. I thought it was a well-done prehistoric level. I liked how dopey and stupid the cavemen were. And I liked that for some reason, the developers came up with the idea that the enemies should be cats with no arms, but wings that would fly and shoot fireballs at you.
Yeah.
Like, where did they come up with this?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. So as I slow down and actually read through some of the names of the levels, because that's what it's taking for me to remember. The Aquaria Towers, I liked that one. That was a creative design with the flow of water. Fracture Hills I actually liked, even though, you had to pay money to that giant turd bear at the end of the game to know how to do anything to defeat these enemies. That was kind of frustrating, but I liked that level. And then Shady Oasis I also liked. That was another cool level to me.
That's the one with Shorty the Hippo. And it's so funny because Shorty the Hippo really wants to eat fruit. And when he eats fruit, he turns into like 5 times his size and he'll bust down walls for you.
Yes, that's it.
And if you talk to, it's so funny because like the trees with the fruit are right there and he could easily shake them. And if you talk to him, he'll be like, yeah, I bet if you headbutt that, the fruit will come down. Like I can almost picture him like scratching his arm. Like, I bet if you do that, you can get me that fruit. You're going to get me that fruit? You're going to give me that fruit, right?
I'm just a little too hungry to shake the tree myself, but can you...
Yeah, he was kind of a turd burglar, but he was fine.
I thought he was a cute character. Like, there are a lot of cute NPCs in this
Oh yeah,
one.
and I like the NPCs. I will say that I do like the use of NPCs in this game a lot more, and I think that it was a good adoption going into the third game in the trilogy. But yeah, I mean, can we talk boss fights for a hot moment?
I was going to bring up the second boss battle, which was the least amount of fun that I had ever had playing this entire series. But do you want to talk about the first one first, or?
I don't have much to say about Crush. Crush was like, I was like, okay, Crush, whatever, you're fine. But I would love to talk with you a little bit about Gulp. Because let me tell you what happened in my brain. I was fighting Gulp, okay? Big green guy, rocket packs on his back, whatever. He shoots things at you, lays like lightning balls. So I was playing through it, and I was like, oh man, he's kind of handed my ass to me right now. Okay. So 2 times I'm like, okay, well, maybe I just need to focus more. 5 times I'm defeated. I'm like, oh, okay. You know what? Maybe this is a good boss. Maybe this is really challenging. And then I was killed for like the 8th or 9th time, and I really took a step back and went, no, this is bad. This is unreasonable. And I love 90s games that don't throw you bones. This was, take it away, please.
I also had significant camera issues with this fight.
Yes.
And this reminded me, I had some bugs in this boss battle. So the way this battle goes, Gulp has 10 hit points. You cannot actually hurt him. Instead, you get these drops from pterodactyls. They're carrying eggs, and they can drop these eggs, and a couple of things might hatch. You might get rockets, you might get barrels, you might get bombs, you might get chickens. So really the rockets are the best thing because they just shoot straight at him. But whatever you get, you got to eat up or hit towards him in some way, whether you spit it out or headbutt it. He can eat everything that's dropped too, especially the chickens, which will give him health back. So you don't want that to happen. The bug that I had was pterodactyls at one point just stopped dropping stuff. So I was just evading his attacks for 5 minutes with no way to actually progress, which was insane. The problem with this level to me was that the drops are really slow. They only drop 2 at a time, sometimes 3, but generally 2. And once you hurt Gulp with one of the drops, the other drop automatically disappears. It like explodes. So the battle is just insanely drawn out. It's insanely tedious. It's like, okay, I get what you want me to do. Let me do it. Don't hide it. Don't try to make your boss fight seem more difficult by making it longer. That's I think we talked about this in the difficulty in video games episode. Endurance challenges are not fun.
No, and the fact that Gulp could consume the chickens and regenerate health. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm all for enemies regenerating their health. That's my favorite part of Breath of the Wild, to be honest with you. But the fact that, like, you get in these unreasonable, like, impossible positions, and then your game throws you a bug that isn't Sparks the Dragonfly. That's the end of that joke. Suddenly, it's, oh, okay, so...
Thank you.
Suddenly, you realize that, oh, he's just going to eat my health, and I'm not going to recharge any health. It's different if he's regenerating health on his own. It's than whenever he actually is, like, eating your source of health. And don't get me wrong, that sounds clever, but it's just not.
I could forgive it if I could hurt him more than once per round. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they dropped, 3 chickens and he ate 2 of them and I got 1, if the next round, if they dropped 3 rockets and I could shoot all 3, if I could get to them before he ate them, I would forgive that completely, but you can't do that. So in theory, because I think the 3 drops are reserved only for chickens, in theory, Gulp could restore 3 hit points in 1 round, which sets you back by about a good, I would estimate like 4 minutes.
And for what? Like, how is your life improved by those extra 4 minutes? When I beat Gulp, when I was done with Gulp, I kind of sat there and I just, like, whenever I beat Demise in Skyward Sword, I was like, yeah, this might have taken me 30 tries, but I learned it and I did it, and it's fair, right? Because there's still a chance that you'll be defeated, but there still takes skill. But when I beat Gulp, I was like, I'm never playing this again. I was like, you can't make me go back and do this, and I won't.
Yeah, this was just, I had so little fun with this, and it just took way too long. This just fell so flat for me.
If I can speak just transparently here for a second, I think Gulp was the hardest enemy in literally all of the Spyro I've played. I don't know about you. And I'm not saying difficult in like a fairness level. I'm talking like fair and unfair. He was just the most difficult. Like, why you have to be that way?
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, it doesn't add anything, right? It's just, it's an endurance fight, and you know, those have to be done right for them to be effective, and this ain't it. It's just not it.
Correct.
But we've mentioned the orbs a bunch of times up to this point. After you defeat Gulp, this is where the orbs start to come into play, because this is where the professor reveals his power crystal business. And then Alora says, all right, now this is where the orbs come in. You need 16 to go forward, and then towards the end you need 40 to fight Ripto. It's just a complete 90-degree turn away from how we were already progressing. I think you really nailed it whenever you described some of these mechanics and progressions and designs as leftovers. I really think that's what it was, because this didn't even need to be in here.
No, and it kind of felt like a hodgepodge of elements from... It's almost like they took all 3 games and then took all of these strange elements and put them into the second one instead of, you know, dispersing them evenly throughout all 3. They just threw in, like, the ones that, maybe people will like them here. It was like, no, I don't. Could have done this elsewhere, but, yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on in Ripto? Before we move on, we should say the story progresses exactly how you think it will. You confront Ripto. He doesn't have motivation. You beat Ripto. That's pretty much it.
And you be the judge of it, but I would say that Gulp is harder than Ripto.
I agree with that.
I mean, even if you don't play it, just watch a playthrough. You'll be able to see the difference between Gulp and Ripto, and that'll be that.
So now we move on to Spyro 3, or as it's appropriately titled, Spyro Year of the Dragon. It was only named that because it came out in 2000, which was the Year of the Dragon. So again, 1 year after the predecessor. The devs were super influenced by Doom, strangely enough, and Crash. The levels here were much bigger. They had various means of preventing confusion and loading issues by hiding certain areas behind portals and such. And some of those portals had some fun new minigames, like skateboarding was the big one. You can skateboard a lot with Hunter, because Hunter is back in Spyro 3. I thought that was really fun. It's pretty simple. You just do like spins and flips. But it's fun, you know. I remember loving that as a kid. And I had Tony Hawk. Like, don't get me wrong, I wasn't like depraved of Tony Hawk. I was a Rodney Mullen boy all day on Tony Hawk.
Really?
Yeah, I loved it because he was the manual guy. Like,
yes,
he was super good at flat skating.
Him and Chad Muska, I think. Yeah, no, Rodney Mullen was the best though. I was a Rune Glifberg guy, but we can go down that.
Pick out of left field. Wow.
I know, I'm sorry. I loved the skateboarding, and I think any game that was developed between 1995 and 2002, if it had skateboarding, it was like chef's kiss.
Yeah, bring that back. Have you played the new Tony Hawk remasters?
I think the last I played was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4 on the PlayStation 2, which is a masterpiece.
Their numbers 1 and 2 are out now. Like, they're remastered. You can get them on the Epic Store. I think the big issue with them is that you have to be online to play them, which is another thing that Epic does all the time, which is ridiculous. But
yes, Epic.
yeah, I'm keeping an eye on to see if it ever goes below $20, and that's when I'm going to pick it up. But anywho's, back to Year of the Dragon. The music, again, Stuart Copeland, still sounding as you'd expect. The graphics were improved. They look noticeably better, I think. And the mechanics, with the exception of the new characters, which we'll talk about, are the same. The game does get rid of the whole enemy soul skill points thing, so now enemies just drop gems as usual, which is nice. They do away with the orbs. This is very reminiscent of Spyro 1. You're saving dragons, this time in the form of dragon eggs, and you're collecting gems.
I missed that. I dare I call it the human element, but in this case we'll call it the dragon element. I like tasks that feel like they actually have purpose. Yeah. What else? There was something else that was in my noggin I wanted to get out about this game. It was kind of a return to form. It felt like, yeah, we're going to go back to just kind of kicking some butt, and it's going to make sense. I even thought that the enemies were strong too, with the Rhinox having that consistency there. Because I'm not gonna lie, there were a lot of moments in Ripto's Rage where I was like, wait, weren't these guys the bad guys in the last level? Weren't these guys the good? It got kind of flip floppy and confusing, and
yeah, I can see that.
Not the case here. I thought, yeah. Anyway, they just ditching the enemy souls thing 10 times over was the right move with this game.
Yeah. We mentioned that there are new characters in this game. This is the first game in the trilogy. And we should say, we know there are other Spyro games out there.
What?
But they are questionably received, oftentimes. Generally, we're just strictly talking about the trilogy. So this is the first time you get to play as new characters. There are 4 of them. There is Sheila the kangaroo, Sergeant Bird the penguin,
the very best,
Bentley the yeti, and Agent 9, a gun-wielding monkey. So your favorite was Sergeant Bird?
Oh, by a landslide. Especially the mission where he comes up to you and he goes, oh yes, I've got to go through this portal here and I've got to help this fairy. It's a strictly platonic relationship between her and I. Something I just need to go and help her. She's in need. I'm like, oh, you're a bird. Give it a rest. Go help her. Like, just yeah. Who is your favorite?
Yeah, Sergeant Bird was definitely my favorite too. Like, they're all good. So just going through them one by one, Sheila's a kangaroo. As you'd expect, she can double jump and she can, like, super jump. So that's kind of where her levels lie. Sergeant Bird is a penguin. You can fly with him, so it kind of does the verticality of the Sheila levels, but a little bit better. And he's also a war vet, so he's wearing a helmet, and he has missile launchers on his back.
Classic Bird. So
it's pretty tough to top a rocket-propelled penguin, but they try to do so with Bentley the Yeti. He pretty much just plays like a Yeti, right?
He's a Yeti, but his vocabulary is on another level for a child. Like, I would need to have a dictionary. If it was the year 2000 and I was listening to Bentley, I'd be like, what was that word? What?
He's a fancy boy.
He's a real fancy boy for being a Yeti. And then there's Agent 9, and Agent 9 is a monkey with a gun. Yeah,
I guess this is where they were implementing their Doom inspirations, because you know, he's literally like, it goes into first person shooting with Agent 9 a couple times, and like, it's not great, but it's like in a game like Spyro, it's so different and done well enough that it's like, okay, like, yeah, I'm into this.
Yeah.
I liked Agent 9. He wasn't my favorite because, like, come on, Sergeant Bird.
I liked all of them, to be honest. I thought that they were all great additions to the game, and they didn't feel forced. You know how sometimes a game's like, okay, got to do these new quests? Not the case. It felt organic, and I wanted to help them. And again, I think it's because you were more morally driven. You were helping, pardon me for going on the psychology of this, but you're helping the dragons. You're helping these people that mean something to you, and they've been, you know, humanified in the first game, so suddenly getting these eggs instead of just orbs and talismans because someone's forcing you to help them. That'd be like if like someone was broken down on the side of the road, the cops stopped you and said, "Can you help them change their tire?" Like what? This is not my idea of help I want to do. I loved the side characters in this game, and they all had distinct personalities.
And that theme of help is brought forth when we rescue them, because Moneybags has now, in his quest for infinite wealth, has turned to crimes against humanity and is just imprisoning these creatures that
Horrible.
You know, are just trying to survive. So you literally have to pay him money to release these creatures, because Moneybags is in cahoots with the main baddie of the game, and he's taking bribes to enslave living creatures. There's really no two ways around this one. And if you pay him more than he got paid, then he'll let them out. And every time you let them out, they always like beat the shit out of him, and it's great.
Yeah, like why?
It's so great.
Why couldn't we fight Moneybags? Why couldn't we actually hurt Moneybags?
You get to chase him down at the end of this game. Like, you can chase him down to get all the gems you've given him over the entire game back. You do get to do that.
Well,
so I guess that's something.
I guess it's something.
It's like he comes straight out of the gate with the "I was just doing my job" line. And it's like, man,
that statement doesn't. It's aging worse and worse. So Moneybags, you can go straight to hell. Also, I just had a fever dream of a thought of what if they decided instead of Stuart Copeland that they just went ahead and said, let's get the music of Aaron Copeland in here. Like, what do you think Spyro would sound like?
Oh, I'm picturing, what was that cannon level that I mentioned was one of my favorites? The, like, Badlands level with the cannons from Ripto.
Uh-huh.
You remember the desert level? Just picturing that with Rodeo.
I was going to say Rodeo is the first thing that comes to my mind. Dun, dun. Yeah.
But then we also, like, in some of the more, fantasy levels that are, like, up in the air, or, like, the darker levels, we play, like, his atonal stuff, like Emblems.
Oh, okay.
It's just really atonal and 12-tone and weird. Oh, yeah. Run the gamut. Call up Aaron Copeland. Where's he at?
I don't think anyone's heard
his
from
line's
him.
busy. I don't know what's going on.
Uh-oh. Sorry to take us off there. Shall we tell the story, at least the beginning of it?
Yeah, this one's actually got a story and a villain with motivation.
What?
Some kind of motivation anyway.
What?
But yeah, do you want to kick off the story?
Oh, I'll kick it. Kick Moneybags straight in the teeth. The story begins. We've got Spyro, Hunter, and Elder Dragons taking a snooze. And then this rabbit lady in a robe pops through a hole in the ground with some rhinos, which we learn are called Rhinox. They start stealing eggs. Chaos ensues. After the chaos really happens after she steps on Hunter's tail. So I guess Hunter's kind of good for something. Now, Hunter's okay. Just his voice acting was a little bit, the direction of the voice acting. I'm not trying to knock on the guy who did the voice. Yeah, and then she's giving the eggs to the sorcerer. And I'm not going to lie, from the very beginning, I saw in her face some hesitation, but we can get to that later in the story.
Yeah, it's broadcasted so obviously.
Yes.
And it's done all the time. But I am a sucker for a villain that, like, kind of turns to the other side, or maybe not even turns to the other side, but becomes a sort of an anti-hero.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot in the Spyro. There's a lot in the Star Wars sequels that was done less than well, let's say. But the arc with Kylo Ren kind of turning into an anti-hero, I thought that was really cool.
I'm down with that.
I really did.
That doesn't frustrate me. I'm cool with that.
Everything that came after that point, I was like, oh my God. But anyway, that's another podcast.
Another podcast for another day. So basically, with the stealing of the eggs, you can tell just from the opening sequence why you're doing what you're doing, like the purpose of the game, and that's to get the eggs back for your family, for your tribe, for your people, or should I say, for your dragons.
And we should say the reason this is important is because, so this character that's coming to steal the eggs, she is a bunny in like hooded robes, and her name is Bianca. She came from this hole in the ground, and we find out one of the fairies flies down there, and we find out that it's like the hole leads to like a far off world where dragons don't exist. The lore behind this is like dragons left that world, and once they left, the magic started leaving as well. I think that's lore in Ripto as well, if I'm remembering that correctly. But suffice to say, dragons don't exist in that world, and for one reason or another, the person that is in charge of Bianca, this dragon sorceress, wants these dragon eggs. We find out later that her motivation isn't, like, she doesn't really care about the dragons. She cares about taking their wings for a sort of immortality spell to make herself immortal. So it's not amazing motivation, but it's better than, I hate dragons, let's set up camp here, you know?
Yeah, no, she has her teacher, basically, who's telling her to do these things, and okay, Anakin Palpatine kind of thing going here, like, whatever. It makes sense to me.
I'll go kill all the dragon younglings.
Uh-oh. Yeah. So I get it. I think it's great.
Master Skywalker.
Master Skywalker, what are we going to do? Oh, God. This is good. I like this. So I like the names of all of the worlds that you go through in this game too. If I might just kind of jump through some of these, we've got Sunrise Spring, Midday Gardens, Evening Lake, and then we've got Midnight Mountain. And to be honest, this division of levels was not too taxing, because they crammed all of the levels into 3 worlds in Ripta's Rage, which I found to be kind of exhausting, admittedly. But to have the levels divvied up this way between these levels, to have these levels divvied up this way between the worlds felt fair to me. Again, my personal favorites in all of these are like the speedways. I just love those levels, and they're
tough in this one.
Oh, I love them.
The speedways.
Oh,
they're so much more difficult.
They are, but they are satisfying in a way that is. My mother would have said, "Oh, there's medication for that." But I just the obsessive pursuit of them. But lots of cool levels. We've got like levels where, we're going through and there's like this door that is black and has stars coming out of it. And there's sometimes there's a face next to it. Sometimes there isn't. And now, instead of just traipsing through whatever place, suddenly Sheila's there and she goes, "Hi, Spyro. Let me jump in and help." And you're like, okay, so we've got someone here to help us now. That's great. And they're all lovable. I don't know.
Yeah, and the second party characters, their levels aren't going to be as dense as Spyro's levels, but they're still like a ton of fun. You mentioned the one Sergeant Bird type level. It's really good.
Chef's
the
kiss.
Sergeant Bird level with the hummingbirds that are like army recruits is good. The Sheila level where she's helping like these very stylized Germanic billy goats that are like, "Oh, the Rhinox are here. You have to help us get them out of our town." Yeah, that's really good. It's just really good.
It's playful, and it's not like it's, it doesn't feel like it's like being offensive, as one would say. It's just caricatures of these animals, really. It's fun. I don't know. It's a kid's game, gosh darn it.
There was one, I think it might have been in Ripto's Rage, not this one, that was like quote-unquote Middle Eastern in flavor.
Yeah, you know what?
Was verging on a little bit not okay.
That felt bad. I remember that one.
Yeah, not great. But yeah, I agree with you. The levels in this one were my personal favorites. Like, gee whiz, where's the one? Like, Icy Peak is a good one. Like, all of Midday is a good one. Sunny Villa, like, all of that is really... Yeah, like, there weren't really a lot of levels here that I didn't like except for Seashell Shore.
Seashell Shore.
Which is tough to say.
I played this game literally in 3 days.
The water levels.
So
I hate the water levels.
Let me look this one up. Because I'm you know what? I wasn't wild. This was the one I didn't like. I liked, which one was it? The Fleet one. Oh, where are you? I remember you. The Sunken Fleet level. Evening Lake. It's, Lost Fleet. Starfish Reef didn't upset me, but the one did. Are you serious? Oh, thank you. Sorry. An Aperol Spritz just apparated, I believe. Cheers to you, my darling one.
No, tell her I don't want one. Tell her it's fine.
Richard says he doesn't want one. It's fine. She'll make you anything you want, food or drink. So, when we're all together and I don't have a rain barrel seminar on a Wednesday, I'm sorry.
Nothing like a good visual gag for a podcast.
They can all see it. Let me tell you, it's in a plastic wine glass, and it's 3 parts Prosecco to 2 parts Aperol to 1 part club soda with a good old wedge of orange in here. So.
You said Prosecco, and for some reason my brain went to prosciutto, and I was like, that's really gross, dude.
No, I ate all of the prosciutto yesterday, if I can be completely honest with you and all of the people listening.
It's some of the best cuts of meat.
Oh my gosh. Have you ever had prosciutto di Parma?
I don't think so. It sounds great.
I'm gonna change your life. Anyhow, I could go off on this all evening, but let's talk some more levels. I just didn't like the levels in Ripto very much, but these ones really satisfying. And even though they weren't as tightly themed as Spyro the Dragon's levels, because there was a lot of connectivity between the levels, like in Dreamweavers and Magic Crafters. You kind of got the sense that you were taking steps outside, but these ones felt like portals to new dimensions, and I thought it was nice.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm really happy that they took a return to form in terms of how the levels operated versus, levels like in Ripto. I like that they segmented the levels. So, like, going through, there are purple portals in pretty much every level that will take you to a, like, new annex of that level. I don't know how they were... Well, no, it should be the same on Switch. Like, they don't have mini-maps, which was kind of annoying, but otherwise perfectly fine. Or, like we'd mentioned, they take you to new character levels, like Agent 9 or Bentley or whoever. Or, I guess we left out one playable character, Sparks. You can play as Sparks
yes.
in this one. So I did these as a kid. I didn't do a single one this playthrough, partly because of time. Did you?
The Sparks levels?
Yeah.
I did. I actually did one, maybe 2. I did at least one, and I really like it. It reminded me, for those of you who've played Call of Duty Black Ops, there's an arcade where you break out of the chair and you like waddle around the room, a little too slowly, and you get to this computer and you're playing a game where you kind of it's one of them shoot 'em up games. But that's kind of what you're doing with Sparks. You're like shooting lights at these Rhinox or crabs or whatever they are. I forget what they are at that point.
And it's a top-down shooter.
It's a top-down.
If I'm remembering correctly.
That's I couldn't get the word.
That's what makes it more fun. It's more like a tactile strategy kind of thing.
Arcade-like.
Than like that compared to like Agent 9, where it's like first-person shooter.
Yeah, I prefer the arcade shooters sometimes. But yeah, I did a Sparks level, and it was tastefully challenging. It wasn't too easy.
Yeah, we all remember our first Sparks level. I think that's the theme of this podcast.
That's our first episode. We talked about the Sparks levels. The Sparks levels of, what was it? Halo 2 had a Sparks level even.
This is turning into like one of those click hole videos. Like, I remember my first Mario.
What was? I can't remember anything. Oh my gosh. Forgive me. You're going to get me going. And I was
remember when my Super Nintendo spit out Mario's bones for the first time.
And I was his priest. Classic.
Wow, yeah, I'm loving the tangents that we're getting.
Me too.
Yeah, so did we skip over anything in this story?
I mean,
we skipped over the like general progression, but I think we talked about all of the story aspects, didn't we?
I think so. Bianca basically struggles with aiding the Uber sorceress, and she kind of ends up coming to help Spyro and Hunter through warnings first, and then eventually actually like being there with them.
And then eventually in a romantic relationship with Hunter. Because we forgot to mention, Hunter is immediately enamored with Bianca from the very first time she comes around and starts being a jerk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Much to Spyro's dismay. He hates this. So does Allura. But
they snuggle at the end.
It's one of those classic, like, there's romance on the screen, and like Spyro represents all the like 10-year-olds. It's like, ew, gross.
Even though Allura snuggles up right next to him as the camera pans away, and then Sparks winks and flies away, and I'm like, Sparks, you behave yourself, you little... It's a cute game. The sorceress doesn't have a name other than sorceress, does she?
The alligator if she does, it's not presented in a meaningful way. I'm pretty sure she doesn't. Did you find her end fight to be particularly difficult? I found like as long as you just kept moving, it was fine.
I actually liked all of the mini boss fights in this game because they actually felt reasonable and difficult. I didn't think hers was too demanding, but I thought her fight was... I know I complained about the cutscenes in the first, or in Ripto's Rage, but I kind of wish I would have had like a little bit of a, okay, we're going to go fight her now, but instead they kind of dropped you in the middle of the fight and like, okay, go get her. I was like...
They did that with every boss battle in this one, if I remember right.
They did. You took your mode of
transport. They just kind of drop you there.
Each mode of transportation, you just kind of went into the arena, which made sense one of the 3 or 4 times that you did it.
I vaguely remember, I might be misremembering this one, but I remember the first one, you're fighting this like toad in a fire arena, and inexplicably, I mean, you get there inexplicably, and then somehow the kangaroo Sheila gets there completely inexplicably, and she's like, hey, I just followed you here. And it's like, what? How did I get here? Who are you? What's going on? Yeah, I guess that's another thing that we didn't mention or that we just glossed over is that each boss fight, one of your friends is going to be helping you, whether it's Sheila, Sergeant Bird, Bentley, or Agent 9. Agent 9 helps you with the sorceress fight, right?
Yep.
And then, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I thought the boss fights were far more satisfying and well-balanced compared to the other 2 games. Because Ripto, you either have someone that's too easy or just like, this is dumb. And I don't mean like Dark Souls, this is dumb. I mean like, wow, why? Spyro the Dragon, not much to write home about there. Bosses in this game?
Yeah, I really think, the spin-offs that came after these 3 were really met with a lot of I was going to say well-intentioned, but what I meant to say was valid criticism, because there was like major departments from the formula in terms of the art style, in terms of how you played the game, in terms of really everything. And I admire them for taking risks, but like nothing, I guess you could maybe argue that Skylanders had a decent fan base, but nothing really hit like the original trilogy. And I remember I was, I'm assuming, are we good to move on to like just closing thoughts and stuff?
Absolutely. I'm fine with that, my friend.
I remember when this was announced, almost alongside the Crash remaster. I think Crash was announced slightly beforehand. That was when I was briefly working at GameStop. And to see the other, I was 26 at the time, 27, to see the other 26-year-olds like come in jazzed about Spyro was just super cool.
Oh, yeah.
And, the Crash remaster is also really good. They're both exceptionally well done. They don't fix a lot of the inherent problems that the older games have, specifically thinking Crash with some really bizarre depth perception issues. But, and then with Spyro, minor things like the camera being a little bit ridiculous, and certain challenges like the Bo Peep challenge being just god-awful. It's faithful so much so that, I think it's the gold standard for any teams wanting to remaster old games. So, no offense to like Shaq Fu, but it's just not as good of a remaster.
No, and
what a mess
Shaq,
that game is.
Shaq, if you're listening, please forgive us. No, yeah, it's just, I hear you loud and clear, buddy. That's Spyro.
Anything else? Do you have anything else?
I don't really have anything else to add. It was it's been a long time since I've beaten a video game in like 3 days. But I did that with Year of the Dragon, with today being the end, but again, between work, carpenter bees, and getting my sister back on the road. Again, I want to just thank you for the amount of work that you put into compiling notes and everything. So it was...
Yeah, I didn't get the notes to be super complete towards the end because I too was rushing to get through. But yeah, I think Spyro, it was a good experience. I think this was your pick, actually. And I think it was a good pick.
It was one I know that we had talked about because I knew that you played it before. Like you actually played it during its day. When I tell you I played that perfectly legal copy of Spyro, I was like in college or later in high school whenever I played it for the first time. So in terms of like nostalgic weight, probably more in your court than mine in this case, but I'm just glad we covered it regardless, and I'm looking forward to some other games that you and I are going to be looking at soon.
For sure. We just wanted to kind of put this at the end because we've been not super great about consistently doing this. Please, if you like this episode, the number one coolest thing that we think that you could do would be to share our channel with your friends through social media, through word of mouth, through text messaging, whatever you want. It's also super helpful if you subscribe to our show, leave us an iTunes rating. That's particularly nice to get into that algorithm. And yeah, if you have any questions or comments on the show, the format, questions about the games, or just want to write in and have your message read on air, you can do that. You can find the email in the show notes, but in case you want it spelled out for you right now, it's pixelprojectradio@gmail.com.
We have great fun putting this program together, so please message us your thoughts, opinions, games that you like, games that you might want to hear us cover. We're here for it all. We can't guarantee that we'd necessarily be able to cover literally anything, but if you came along and said, why don't you guys play Bug Snacks or Knack or Diddy Kong Racing, we just might. So,
And if you come at us with Kingdom Hearts, we won't.
I've played 1 and 2, but no, I won't play 3 because Kingdom Hearts was like, surprise, here's 800 games all out of order. And then they're like, by the way, here's Kingdom Hearts 3 and it's not on the PlayStation 3. Like, I wanted to flip a table. But anyway, I digress. We love games, and we know a lot of you love games. And if you don't love games, try games. They're a lot of fun, and we'd love to talk with you about them. We'd love to hear what you think. And we don't just do this for ourselves. We know that there are people out there who are who are into hearing opinions that are different than theirs, and some that are here to listen to opinions that are similar than theirs, and some people who are just listening to, find something to be frustrated about. And that's totally your call. But yeah, Richard, it's been great to talk about Spyro with you, to take a walk down what I'd imagine is a very nice memory lane for you.
Yeah, absolutely was. Once again, thank you, Ben, for joining me. And also, just to reiterate, please share our show if you like it. Word of mouth is still the best way, but of course word of mouth means social media and the like. And otherwise, I think we're good to sign off.
Well, thank you for joining me as well, Richard.